October 1938, Harlem. The air along the river carried the smell of diesel and rotting wood. At night, the warehouses near 135th Street stood dark, their windows either boarded or shattered. The streetlights worked in patches. Some blocks had 3 working lamps, others had none. The darkness was not accidental. It served a purpose. Men who needed privacy understood which streets to use and which corners to avoid. Anthony Strollo was known by 2 names. To his associates in the Genovese crime family, he was Tony Bender. To the men he controlled in Harlem, he was simply Strollo. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His authority came from a different place. When Strollo gave an instruction, it was followed. When he asked a question, it was answered. He had spent 15 years building a network that stretched from the docks of Lower Manhattan to the policy banks of Harlem. He understood leverage. He understood consequence, and he understood betrayal. The man who betrayed him was named Michael Conti. Conti was not important. He ran errands, he delivered messages, he collected small debts from bar owners and numbers runners who operated under Genovese protection. Conti was 32 years old. He had a wife in the Bronx and a gambling problem that made him careless. 6 months earlier, he had been approached by a detective named William Harrigan. Harrigan worked out of the 32nd Precinct. He was not part of the honest minority. He took money like most of the others. But Harrigan also fed information to Thomas Dewey's office when it served him. Dewey had been elected district attorney 2 years earlier. His reputation was built on mob prosecutions. Harrigan saw an opportunity. He offered Conti a deal. Small information, nothing that would get anyone killed. Just names, locations, schedules. In exchange, Harrigan would clear a gambling debt Conti owed to a loan shark in Washington Heights. Conti agreed. He thought he could manage both sides. He thought he was clever enough to feed useless information and stay safe. He was wrong. Strollo learned about Conti in late September. The information came from a Genovese associate who worked inside the NYPD's property clerk office. This associate had access to records of seized materials, arrest reports, and case files that never became public. He noticed a pattern. Every time Conti delivered money or carried a message, there was police activity within 48 hours. Not arrests, just presence. Unmarked cars on certain corners. Detectives asking questions in social clubs. Enough activity to disrupt operations without creating headlines. The pattern was subtle, but it was there. Strollo did not react immediately. He spent 2 weeks confirming. He assigned a trusted enforcer named Salvatore Renna to follow Conti. Renna was patient. He did not get close. He simply observed. On October 3rd, Conti met Harrigan outside a diner on St. Nicholas Avenue. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Conti handed Harrigan a folded piece of paper. Harrigan gave Conti an envelope. They did not shake hands. They did not linger. Renna watched from across the street. He took no photographs. He did not need to. He reported what he saw to Strollo that same night. Strollo made his decision within an hour. Conti would be questioned, not killed immediately. Questioned. Strollo needed to know exactly what Conti had told Harrigan, how much damage had been done, and whether other informants existed within his network. The questioning would happen in a controlled location. No witnesses, no interruptions, no possibility of rescue. The location was a basement beneath a butcher shop on East 126th Street. The shop was owned by a man named Angelo Festa. Festa had been paying tribute to the Genovese family since 1929. He asked no questions. When Strollo's men needed the basement, Festa locked the front door, turned off the lights, and went home. The basement had a single entrance. Concrete floor, brick walls, a drain in the center. The walls were thick enough that sound did not carry to the street. It had been used before. On October 11th, Conti received a message. He was told to meet Strollo at the butcher shop at 9 o'clock that evening. The message came through a trusted intermediary. Conti had no reason to suspect anything. Strollo occasionally called low-level associates in for updates. It was not unusual. Conti arrived on time. He wore a gray suit and a brown fedora. He looked nervous, but he always looked nervous. Renna was waiting outside. He opened the door. Conti stepped inside. The shop was dark. The smell of blood and sawdust was faint but present. Renna gestured toward the back. Conti followed. At the rear of the shop, a narrow staircase led down to the basement. The stairs were wooden and uneven. A single bulb hung at the bottom, casting weak yellow light. Conti descended. Strollo was waiting. Strollo sat on a metal folding chair. Two other men stood behind him. One was Renna. The other was a man named Dominic Longo. Longo carried a leather sap in his coat pocket. He did not remove it yet. Strollo gestured to a second chair positioned 3 feet in front of him. Conti sat. The door at the top of the stairs closed. The sound echoed. Strollo did not begin with accusations. He asked simple questions. He asked about Conti's recent deliveries. He asked about the bar owners on Lenox Avenue. He asked if Conti had noticed any police activity in the neighborhood. Conti answered carefully. His voice was steady, but his hands moved too much. He folded them, unfolded them, touched his hat, put it on his lap. Strollo watched his hands. After 10 minutes, Strollo changed his approach. He asked Conti if he knew Detective Harrigan. Conti hesitated. The hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds, but it was enough. Conti said he did not know anyone by that name. Strollo nodded. He did not challenge the answer. He asked another question. He asked if Conti had been to St. Nicholas Avenue in the past 2 weeks. Conti said no. Strollo nodded again. Then Strollo stood. He walked to a small table against the wall. On the table was a glass of water and a folded newspaper. Strollo picked up the newspaper. He unfolded it slowly. Inside the newspaper was the envelope Harrigan had given Conti on October 3rd. Renna had retrieved it from Conti's apartment earlier that day. Strollo placed the envelope on Conti's lap. Conti looked down. His face changed. The color drained. He did not speak. Strollo returned to his chair. He sat. He asked Conti one more time. He asked if Conti wanted to explain the envelope. Conti started to answer. His voice cracked. He said it was not what it looked like. Strollo raised one hand. Conti stopped talking. Strollo told him to start from the beginning. He told him to speak clearly. He told him not to lie again. Conti talked for 40 minutes. He explained the gambling debt. He explained Harrigan's offer. He listed every piece of information he had provided. Delivery schedules. Names of bar owners who paid protection. The location of a numbers bank on 141st Street. He insisted he had not given any information that would lead to arrests. He said he was trying to protect himself. He said he had not meant to cause harm. Strollo listened without interrupting. He did not take notes. He did not ask follow-up questions. When Conti finished, Strollo sat in silence for nearly 3 minutes. The basement was completely quiet except for the faint hum of the ventilation grate near the ceiling. Conti stared at the floor. His hands were shaking now. He gripped his hat tightly. Strollo finally spoke. He told Conti that he appreciated the honesty. He said it would be taken into account. He asked if there were other informants. Conti said no. He said he was the only one. Strollo asked how he could be certain. Conti said Harrigan had told him he was working alone. Strollo nodded. He asked if Harrigan had mentioned anyone else in the NYPD who knew about their arrangement. Conti said no. Strollo stood again. He walked to the table. He poured the glass of water into the drain in the center of the floor. He placed the empty glass back on the table. He turned to Longo and gave a single instruction. He said to take Conti upstairs. Conti looked up. Relief crossed his face. He thought he was being released. He stood quickly. He reached for Strollo's hand to shake it. Strollo did not extend his hand. He simply nodded toward the stairs. Longo moved behind Conti. Renna stayed where he was. Conti climbed the stairs. Longo followed. When they reached the top, Longo opened the door. The butcher shop was still dark. Conti stepped through. Longo stepped through behind him. The door closed. Strollo remained in the basement. Renna remained with him. Neither man spoke. What happened in the next 90 seconds was never documented. No police report was filed. No witness came forward. No body was found that night. But 3 men who worked in the neighborhood later gave consistent accounts. They said they saw Conti walk out of the butcher shop shortly after 10 o'clock. They said Longo was with him. They said Conti got into a black Packard sedan, parked on the corner. Longo got in after him. The car drove east toward the Harlem River. It did not return. By midnight, word had spread through the Italian networks in Harlem. The message was simple. An informant had been handled. No details were provided. No confirmation was given. But everyone understood. Conti's wife reported him missing 3 days later. The missing person report was filed at the 32nd Precinct. Detective Harrigan was the responding officer. He wrote in his report that Conti had likely fled the city due to gambling debts. The case was never investigated further. Conti was never seen again. The consequences of that night were not immediate. They unfolded over the following months. Within 1 week, every precinct captain in Upper Manhattan received the same message through back channels. The message did not come from Strollo directly. It came through intermediaries, lawyers, union officials, and ward leaders who maintained relationships with both organized crime and law enforcement. The message was clear: informants would not be tolerated. Anyone feeding information to prosecutors or reform-minded detectives would disappear, quietly, completely. No warnings would be given. The effect was measurable. In November 1938, Thomas Dewey's office opened 4 new investigations into Genovese operations in Harlem. All 4 investigations stalled within weeks. Witnesses refused to cooperate. Search warrants produced no evidence. Detectives found locked doors and empty rooms. Informants who had previously been reliable stopped returning calls. 2 assistant district attorneys assigned to the cases wrote memos expressing frustration at the sudden lack of cooperation from NYPD sources. The memos went unanswered. Detective Harrigan transferred to a different precinct in January 1939. He requested the transfer himself. He told his supervisors he wanted to work closer to his home in Queens. The real reason was understood, but not spoken. Harrigan had lost his informant. He had lost his leverage. And he knew that continuing to operate in Harlem meant accepting a level of risk he was not willing to take. He spent the rest of his career working property crimes in Astoria. He never worked another organized crime case. The message extended beyond law enforcement. Within the Genovese organization itself, loyalty became absolute. Men who had previously been careless with information became cautious. Conversations that once happened in social clubs moved to private apartments. Names were not spoken aloud in public. Even trusted associates understood that one mistake, one overheard conversation, one moment of weakness could lead to the same outcome Conti had faced. Fear replaced familiarity. Strollo's reputation changed after that night. He had always been respected within the Genovese family, but respect and fear are not the same. After Conti's disappearance, Strollo was feared. Men who worked under him became more careful. They followed orders exactly. They did not ask unnecessary questions. They did not take risks. The efficiency of his operations improved. Collections were made on time. Disputes were resolved quickly. The flow of money from Harlem to the Genovese family increased. But there was a cost. The relationship between the Italian syndicates and the NYPD had always been transactional. Money exchanged hands, favors were granted, arrests were avoided or delayed. It was a system built on mutual benefit. After Conti, that system became more rigid. Police officers who had previously accepted payments began to distance themselves. Some refused meetings, others increased their prices. The informal agreements that had allowed the Genovese family to operate with minimal interference became harder to maintain. Trust, even corrupt trust, requires a degree of predictability. Strollo's actions had introduced uncertainty. In Harlem itself, the reaction was mixed. The black criminal networks that operated independently of Italian control saw the disappearance as confirmation of what they already knew. The Italians were willing to kill their own to maintain discipline. It reinforced the boundaries that existed between the two groups. Cooperation remained limited. Information was not shared freely. Territories were respected more carefully. The unspoken agreement was simple. The Italians controlled certain operations. Harlem operators controlled others. Crossing those lines meant consequences. Among the corrupt police officers who worked in Harlem, the message was received clearly. They could continue taking money, they could continue ignoring certain crimes, but they could not work both sides. They could not feed information to reform prosecutors while also protecting organized crime. The choice had to be made. Most chose silence. A few chose early retirement. None chose to become informants. The broader implications reached Thomas Dewey's office by December. Dewey was building cases against multiple mob figures. His strategy relied on turning low-level associates into witnesses. He offered immunity, protection, and relocation in exchange for testimony. After Conti's disappearance, that strategy became less effective. Potential witnesses were harder to flip. Even when offered generous deals, they refused. The risk was too high. Dewey's conviction rate against organized crime figures dropped significantly in 1939. He would later blame a lack of resources and judicial interference. But the real reason was simpler. The cost of cooperation had become death. Strollo himself never spoke publicly about what happened to Conti. He did not need to. The absence of a body was its own message. In organized crime, uncertainty can be more powerful than confirmation. When a man disappears without explanation, everyone fills in the details themselves. The imagination supplies what evidence cannot. And the fear spreads wider than any public execution could achieve. The butcher shop on East 126th Street remained in operation. Angelo Festa continued selling meat to neighborhood customers. He never spoke about the basement. He never mentioned the night in October when his shop was closed early. When customers asked why the basement door was always locked, he said it was for storage. No one pressed him. The basement was used again over the years. Different men, different interrogations, but the method remained the same. Quiet, controlled, final. By 1940, the structure of organized crime in Harlem had solidified. The Genovese family controlled loan sharking, labor racketeering, and certain gambling operations. Independent black operators controlled the numbers rackets in specific neighborhoods. The police received payments from both sides and interfered minimally. Prosecutors found it nearly impossible to build cases. The system functioned because everyone understood the rules, and everyone understood the consequences of breaking them. Strollo continued rising within the Genovese family. By 1944, he was a capo regime, controlling crews across Manhattan. His reputation for discipline and efficiency made him valuable. He was never arrested for Conti's disappearance. No evidence connected him to the crime. No witnesses came forward. The case remained officially open but uninvestigated. Conti's name appeared on a missing persons list that grew longer each year. Eventually, even that list was archived and forgotten. Detective Harrigan lived until 1967. He died of a heart attack in his home in Queens. His obituary described him as a dedicated police officer who served the city for 30 years. It made no mention of his work in Harlem. It made no mention of informants or investigations. When he was buried, no one from the 32nd Precinct attended the funeral. His wife told relatives that her husband had rarely spoken about his work. She said he preferred to leave it behind when he came home. She never knew why. The Harlem River, where Conti's body was believed to have been disposed of, continued flowing south toward the East River. The currents were strong. Bodies that entered the water there were rarely recovered. The river had no memory. It carried everything away. By November 1938, the water had erased whatever evidence might have existed. The concrete weights, the rope, the final moments. All of it disappeared into the dark current and the mud below. In the decades that followed, the structure of organized crime in New York changed. Families rose and fell, territories shifted, new prosecutors brought new strategies. But the lesson from October 1938 remained. Informants were not tolerated. Betrayal meant disappearance. And the fear created by one basement interrogation lasted longer than any trial or conviction ever could. Strollo himself was eventually murdered in 1962. He was killed on orders from Vito Genovese, the man whose family he had served for decades. The reasons for his death were never fully explained. Some said he knew too much. Others said he had become a liability. His body was found in the trunk of a car in New Jersey. Unlike Conti, Strollo's murder was public, a message to the next generation. But the method was different. The outcome was the same. The basement beneath the butcher shop on East 126th Street was finally sealed in 1971. The building was sold to a new owner who converted the ground floor into a laundromat. The basement was filled with concrete. No excavation was ever performed. No investigation was reopened. The space where Conti had sat and confessed his betrayal became solid and inaccessible. The history was buried, literally and permanently. Today, the building still stands. The laundromat closed in 1995. The ground floor is now a cell phone repair shop. The owner has no knowledge of what happened in the basement 70 years earlier. The customers who come in to fix cracked screens and replace batteries do not know that beneath their feet is concrete poured over a space where men once answered questions they could not afford to answer wrong. The neighborhood has changed. The people have changed. But the ground remembers what the living have forgotten. The night Michael Conti disappeared, the temperature in Harlem dropped to 41 degrees. The wind came off the river and moved through the empty streets. By morning, the city had moved on. New crimes, new investigations, new betrayals. The machinery of organized crime and law enforcement continued its rotation. But for those who knew what had happened, the message was clear and permanent. There were lines that could not be crossed, and crossing them meant vanishing into the October darkness, never to return.